Welcome back. Well, joining me live now is Liberal Senator James Paterson, Labor MP Josh Burns. Thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. I might start with you, Josh Burns. On COVID-19, is the Victorian government right now, has it been letting down the rest of Australia?
Look, Tom, I don't think that that's fair. I think that what this virus has shown right across the world is that this COVID-19 is on the rise. In the United States, we're seeing over 50,000 cases just in one day alone. Obviously, the numbers in Victoria over the last couple of weeks have been really concerning. But the aggressive policy of the Victorian government to go after each and every case, to make sure that we are tracking, tracing, testing and isolating this virus has been unprecedented. It's been really a strong and aggressive policy to make sure that we're not being passive here and that we're going after each and every case. I hope that the stabilisation of numbers are a good sign. I think it's probably too early to tell, but I do think that that today's numbers, if they're lower than yesterday's, that's a good thing, and I hope that tomorrow also brings a lower number.
You've got this aspect, though, of having an inquiry into the hotel quarantine element, and as a result, the government won't answer questions around the decision to have private security firms hired rather than police or ADF. I mean, you can have that inquiry but still answer the basic questions, can't you?
Well, look, I think that the government has been pretty honest and transparent about the fact that something's gone wrong here, that there's an independent judicial inquiry that's going to go and look into make sure that we see exactly what's happened here in these hotel quarantines. And I think that's appropriate because clearly this virus is slippery, and clearly that despite the best efforts of the Victorian government and of the Australian government in trying to quarantine this virus, it's managed to escape. So something's gone wrong. I think the Victorian government's done the right thing by being open and transparent about it and by making sure that we don't repeat these mistakes.
James, the Victorian opposition says the health minister should go. Do you agree?
Well, that's a matter for them. I don't follow her performance as closely as they do, and they want to make that call, that's up to them. Very clearly, though, mistakes have been made and very clearly lessons need to be learned because other states and territories so far, touch wood, appear to have been able to successfully manage hotel quarantine without it leaking into the community in the way that it has in Victoria. But it's in everyone's interest that the Victorian government get on top of this as soon as possible, and we wish them the best in doing so. And the federal government is offering every assistance for them to do so because we all want to get back to normal again. We all want to return to normal again.
But to do so, even if you think the health minister might have had bad moments, replacing them right now, it's a pretty tough brief to get across. Would now be a bad time to get a fresh health minister in Victoria?
That's really a matter for state politicians involved, both on the government side and the opposition side, to make a call like that. My view, from a federal perspective, is that we need to work together to get through this as quick as possible because it's having an enormously negative impact on families, on small businesses, on the economy. We want to be able to return to normal as soon as possible.
All right, yeah, and we are hoping that, well, the peak is flattening at least, if that makes sense. James, I want to go to an issue that's passionate for you. Hong Kong is fleeing, or possibly fleeing in the future, the Chinese national security crackdown. Reports today of a visa that might be available, but at this stage only for skilled migrants. That doesn't seem to make this a humanitarian policy from the Australian government.
Well, I really welcome the Prime Minister's comments yesterday in that press conference where he indicated that he'd asked for a submission to be brought to Cabinet to consider about whether we could more easily welcome people from Hong Kong fleeing what is now a very terrible situation there as a result of the actions of the Chinese Communist Party. Obviously, Tom, I'm not privy to submissions to Cabinet, so I don't know the details of what's proposed. But my view is we should make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible from Hong Kong to come to Australia that we can accept within reason. I mean, obviously we can't accept millions of people, but we should do our part along with the United Kingdom, United States, Taiwan, many other countries, New Zealand.
But could it be something more along the line of the one-off allotment, so not unlimited, but the allotment granted to Syrians, way back when to the Vietnamese people as well, that isn't just relying on skilled migrants, that has a humanitarian aspect as well? Would you like to see that pursued?
Well, clearly our motivation is humanitarian. We're not just, we may also have some economic dividends from it because I think the people of Hong Kong are highly skilled, highly entrepreneurial, wonderful potential migrants to Australia. But clearly our motivation is humanitarian. It's in response to what's happened with a change of policy that now threatens their freedoms. And as you say, there's a lot of good precedent throughout history whether it's Bob Hawke post Tiananmen Square, whether it is Vietnamese refugees after the fall of Saigon, whether it is the Syrian intake more recently. There is certainly a lot of precedent, and Australia is a very generous country in welcoming people fleeing from persecution, and I expect that we will be again in this scenario.
Josh, would Labor be comfortable with this? I mean, it's always a zero-sum game. If you're going to give a sort of one-off allotment, you're doing that to people in Hong Kong versus a lot of other difficult humanitarian situations around the world. Should priority be given, essentially?
There's a couple of points here, Tom. I think the first thing is that there are currently 17,000 people who originated from Hong Kong that are in Australia right now, and Penny Wong made a statement earlier today that suggested that Labor would be supportive if the government moved to make those temporary protections and the temporary protections arrangement that are applicable to those 17,000 people to make them permanent. And I think that would be a really good start. Clearly, the developments in the last week or so are very concerning for the people of Hong Kong, and there are a lot of young people especially who are concerned about their future. I think that whatever path the government goes down when it comes to protecting the people of Hong Kong and offering protections for the people of Hong Kong, it'll probably need to be done in a way that maybe doesn't have all of the public sort of posturing and just done quietly in the background to make sure that people in Hong Kong get a quiet passage in Australia. I think it'll probably need to be done in those sorts of lines and those sorts of terms to manage the difficult and complex relationship that Australia has with China.
Well, when you say public posturing, I mean, yesterday the Prime Minister was asked about this. Clearly, journalists have followed up and extracted sort of an indication where they're going to go. It can't be anonymous. I mean, it needs to be announced. Isn't that fair enough? The government, if it's going to take action here, is clearly saying that this law, which would also mean Chinese Australians that participated in a protest in Australia and then just visited Hong Kong, could be arrested and jailed.
I think that that's right, Tom. I think that what the principle that's important here, and James alluded to it as well, is that Australia, and I think this is a bipartisan matter of principle, is that Australia doesn't support the developments over the last couple of weeks, especially around the national security law, and working out ways in which we can best support the people of Hong Kong is something that we need to be doing strategically, and we need to be doing in the interests of the people of Hong Kong. Clearly, China has exercised aggression in a number of fronts, and we need to be managing that as best as possible.
I wanted to ask you finally, James, about the AFP asking federal prosecutors to consider charging an ABC journalist. This is over publication of leaked classified information that related to alleged war crimes. What do you make of this? Is this concerning? I mean, it seems pretty clearly in the public interest, this story.
Limited in what I can say about these specific incidents, but more generally on the question of press freedom and its interaction with national security, I share the concern that many journalists have that it has impinged, the national security legislation has impinged on the work that they do. It's why I was the first parliamentarian to call for an inquiry by the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security to conduct an inquiry of this. That inquiry is taking place right now in a very bipartisan fashion. I'm confident that the recommendations that it will make will be sensible, but the government's also made some additional changes already, one of which is that it would require the approval of the Attorney General before any prosecutions could commence. And Christian Porter has publicly said that he is seriously disinclined to proceed with any prosecution of a journalist for simply doing their job.
Yeah, I guess you have an issue with whether or not it's okay in that form, that sort of check and balance, Josh, or whether that's too reliant on the government of the day.
Raids on journalists and a number of attacks on press freedom in this country as a trend over the last couple of years. I think that if the comments made by Simon Birmingham today that suggest that Christian Porter wouldn't be proceeding with this, or that would do everything to avoid this, I think that's the best course of action. We need to be making sure that we're protecting journalists in this country, protecting freedom of press, and protecting the freedom of those who are seeking to make these matters public and matters of national importance public.
Josh Burns, James Paterson, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.